In a Souls-like, you are afraid of fall damage. In Mortal Shell, you become the fall damage. Hey guys, how's it going? It's me Fermyon here, and today I want to talk about Mortal Shell, and why I think it's a good Souls-like for anyone who wants a more laid-back and casual experience from this genre. It took a while getting used to the slower pace of combat, but by the end of the game, which took about 12 hours for me, I ended up feeling at home in Fulgrim. Despite some glaring issues and admittedly limited build variety, I can't deny I've had a lot of fun with the game. So strap on in and let me show you the world of Mortal Shell. Now, before I go in depth with this Souls-like, let's talk a bit about what separates it from the rest. For example, Lies of P stands out because of the weapon crafting system and the P organ, which feels like a skill tree. Lords of the Fallen excels at level design, and Neo 2 is there if for some reason you wanted the Path of Exile of Souls-likes. Mortal Shell differentiates itself thanks to the hardening mechanic. Think of it as having the Dark Souls 1 poise available on demand. During the time your shell is hardened, you will not take any damage. Getting hit does cancel the effect, but that will often lead to staggering whomever hit you, which then gives you a window to attack. I know it sounds like an overpowered ability, and frankly it is. The game never really feels too difficult, and partially it's all thanks to this. Besides, you can harden at almost any point in time. Are you attacking? You can harden. Are you using a healing item? You can harden. Are you rolling? Yep, you can harden. Are you jumping off a cliff? Guess what? You can harden and pretty much kill anything in one hit if you land on them. It really is a fun mechanic, and once again, very reminiscent of how broken poise was in Dark Souls 1. With all this said, let's talk about one aspect where the game does suffer quite a bit, and that would be the lack of build variety. When you first start the game, you're a naked human being. As soon as you complete the tutorial, you will end up in Fulgrim, the main area of the game. Here you will find various dead people, and you can essentially wear those bodies, and thus inhabit the builds. There's a total of 4 main builds you can choose, those being Heroes, with your basic knight with balanced health and stamina, Aerodrim, your tank build that focuses on survivability above everything else, TL, the glass cannon who's very speedy with really good stamina, but with so little health that even an Elden Ring player has more, and lastly, my favorite, Solomon, who's pretty much the weapon art spammer with overall high stats. The trade-off comes from him having a lot of kind of useless passive abilities. Useless in combat, at the very least. That said, you can also have the option to completely ignore all of those shells and just play the game without one. Eventually you can unlock an Obsidian Dark form, which, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it does besides disabling shells. Either way, there's a pretty fun achievement you get for tackling the game without ever using a shell. Think of it as doing a Dark Souls Soul Level 1 run. Admittedly, I haven't tried it just yet, but after I'm done playing through Neo 2, I promise I'm gonna give this a shot. It just seems like something very fun. Anyway, back to build variety. When it comes to weapons, you guessed it, there's only 4 options as well. Unfortunately, you don't really level up in Mortal Shell the same way you do in your typical Souls-like, which means that weapon scaling also doesn't exist. That said, you can upgrade your weapons to increase their damage, but besides that there's not a lot of depth to it. Regardless, your 4 weapons are your regular sword, the Zweihander, the hammer and the chisel, and the big mace. I personally enjoyed the starting sword the most, because it does good damage and it's also like very fast, but I will try the other ones out as well. I have to say, weapon acquisition is quite interesting though. You have 3 dungeons in the game that have a weapon you can get at the entrance. All you have to do is beat the tutorial boss again, but this time with a little twist. He's going to use the weapon that you can acquire in the dungeon. It's not really a big deal and the fights are much easier than when you first meet him, but I can see why someone might feel like it's a bit tedious to fight a boss in order to gain a weapon. Anyway, While doing these dungeons, you will also come across weapon upgrade materials that will then unlock your weapon arts. If you've played Lies of P, you will definitely feel at home with this system. Above your health bar, you can see a couple mini bars that will fill up during combat. This is your resolve, which is basically the same as Fable from Lies of P. Resolve allows you to cast your weapon arts and to use your riposte ability. More on this a bit later. As for the weapon arts, they are all pretty good, but again, I enjoyed the Herald Sword the most, but I feel like this is something that will only come down to preference alone. Now that we are mostly done with the offensive part of combat, let's talk about my favorite defensive option as well. Parries. Mortal Shell is obviously not the first game to have parries, but I have to say, it's one of the few that takes your typical parry into riposte, and adds a little twist to it. If you have enough resolve to do a riposte, you will end up either leeching health from the enemy, planting a bomb inside them that deals massive AoE damage, or stopping time and just beating on them for a while. If you don't have the resolve needed to perform a riposte, that's fine too, since you can just do regular attacks instead. It's just one of those systems that feels really good, no matter what you do. Speaking of good, let's talk about map design and enemy variety. As I've mentioned before, you will be spending a lot of time in Fulgrim, the main area of the game, and from there you will go to various dungeons. Exploration was one of those things that I had a lot of fun with, even though you'll probably get lost often. But I've never really felt like I was super weak or anything of the sort. You can take on any dungeon at any time, though there is obviously an easier and a harder route. You still have the option to do them in any order if you wish. As for the enemy variety, there are some enemies that will be reappearing, but every area has its unique mobs with different movesets. The enemy placement itself is also pretty good for the most part, with the exception of one harder dungeon towards the very end. This right here, 10 archers waiting for you to ambush you. This right here is big Dark Souls 2. Nobody's gonna tell me otherwise. And of course, with challenge, we always think about boss fights. Unfortunately, the game doesn't really have a lot of bosses. You have bosses out in the open world, you have bosses in the dungeons, and once you're done with the dungeons, you will also have the final boss. The problem with the open world bosses is that they end up becoming basic enemies. And I'm not saying that they will show up a few more times. Nuh-uh, we're having a Lost Isolate Taurus and Kepra Demon situation here. It really just becomes something very tedious, and honestly, they just don't feel super memorable. As for the dungeon bosses, I really like the second boss. He reminds me a lot of the Lich King from World of Warcraft. Look, he's even got Remorseless Winter, how can you not like this guy? But the other two didn't really stand out to me that much. On the bright side, we are at least fighting Giant Dead from Dark Souls 1. The last boss, on the other hand, I actually quite enjoyed. The fight itself is mostly okay, but what I really like about it is just the overall design. It has like a very Bloodborne-esque Eldritch Horror kind of vibe to it. Overall, I don't think that the bosses are genuinely too bad or anything of the sort, but I wish they were a bit better. There is one more game mechanic that I really want to talk about, which at first I didn't really like that much, but as I was playing the game, it just grew on me, and now I kind of want to see something akin to this in other games as well. And that would be the familiarity system. Basically, when you first obtain an item, you have no idea what it does. Everything about it is just blank. The more you use it, the better you will become at handling it, thus giving you a better effect of what the item would normally do. It seems like such a silly thing, but when you think about it, it makes sense from a roleplay point of view. When you first start working on something, you're not gonna be knowledgeable. You won't be able to figure out how something works or what you're supposed to do, unless you keep interacting and researching it. Practice makes perfect. And guess what? That's essentially the familiarity system summed up in one sentence, and I love it. At the end of the day, I just think it's a fun mechanic. I don't think it makes the game worse in any way. On the contrary, I feel like people are gonna have fun discovering what certain items do and what their effects are. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong on this, but you can certainly let me know how you feel about it. Last but not least, I want to talk about my favorite feature. This game allows you to play a lute and just relax. There's even a hidden ending where you pretty much retire and just spend the rest of your life with a bandit. It's beautiful. Alright, so let me just say something real quick. This video was supposed to end right here. And I was gonna work on this video Friday, but what happened is that Final Fantasy 16 had some DLC come out. You know, I had to play it, and I made some videos on it. And while I was rendering and waiting for the videos to upload, I decided I would just play Mortal Shell and just finish the No Shell run in the meantime. It was pretty fun, but doing the No Shell run allowed me to see some, let's just say, annoying things in the game that I didn't really feel on my first playthrough. And I'm going to specifically talk about two bosses, Tarsus and the Unchained. So, I said a lot of good things about Tarsus originally. I still think that he's a great boss. He's like the Lich King, he has some very cool movesets, and he's actually, in my opinion, the most complex boss in the game. I very much believe that, and I think he's damn near flawless. The only problem I have with him is that his arena is just so garbage. Basically, I didn't know this until I started doing the No Shell run, but if you touch the arena walls, you will die. There's actual mist, and that mist is going to kill you. And that just ended up being such an unfun experience. Besides that, the thing that killed me the most from him was in phase 2, when he does like a backhand attack, or like an upward slash, I should say. It comes out, I think it comes out a bit too quickly, but maybe that's just my opinion. Either way, it still wasn't too hard of a challenge. But once again, I really wish the arena walls didn't do any damage to you. That just felt very unfair and very unfun. And now, moving on to the Unchained. Honestly, the thing that annoyed me the most with that guy was once again the infinite ad spawn. Now, I know he doesn't do it technically in an infinite manner, but it just feels like that when you get like 10 enemies on the screen at once and you have to deal with all of them, otherwise you're gonna die. Granted, it's pretty easy to bait it out, the attacks I mean. You can just run away, you can do an attack and just harden in the meantime, and that should take care of them. But still, it's just so annoying when you're fighting the boss, the camera is very bad, you don't see anything, and what ends up happening is that some guy picks you up from off screen and you just die. And that was really unfun. But once again, I didn't really mind it too much because it was kind of easy anyway. But yeah, I kind of wish I didn't play the No Shell run because I had much better opinions about the game before this. But even after that, I have to say that it was still an enjoyable time with the game that I had. I still recommend it to people to at least try it out. It's not for everyone, obviously, and I think this is going to have like a very niche audience because of how slow and how clunky it is. But still, I think it's a good game and I love it. Anyway, that's all for me today. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you guys again soon. Take care, everybody.